I call the Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and kia ora to people in the gallery. Mr Speaker, like many people in this House, I'm a parent. I'm the father of 5 beautiful daughters, Mr Speaker, and while I'm a great advocate of breast is best, Mr Speaker, I, like most parents, have relied on infant formula to sustain our helpless but beautiful babies. We've got up in the middle of the night to mix up the formula to make the milk. That is the only thing that our infant babies live on, Mr Speaker. That is why around the world people have reacted so strongly to this. And it is an emotional issue, what we feed our children, and we should realise that, and no parent should make any apology for being concerned. Mr Speaker, I have been a dairy farmer. I can appreciate the effort that goes in to provide clean and pure milk to the company. Mr Speaker, I was also the chairman of a select committee that set up Fonterra back in the year 2000. So I understand that companies set up through legislation had some advantages, but it also had with it clear responsibilities. And they were, of course, given its size and importance to our economy, they were to be the guardians of a reputation that had been built up by generations of people that the dairy industry produced the safest and best food in the world. Mr Speaker, I'm now, as primary industry spokesperson, on behalf of the Labour Party, supporting the government and supporting Fonterra to get out around the world and reassure all our customers that the food that we produce from this country will be safe, it will be pure, and that it will be suitable for customers and meet every one of their expectations, including safety. Clearly, Mr Speaker, we've had a problem here. A mistake has been made, and we could spend a lot of time here trying to analyse timelines and what went on and what could have been done. Mr Speaker, the most important thing now is that we support the government agencies and Fonterra to get out around the world to explain how we produce our milk and milk products in this country and to give them an assurance that the system's fine. Mr Speaker, there are questions, of course, starting to emerge today from China News, Mr Speaker, questions around the laissez-faire market ideology that does determine some of the current thinking by government. Mr Speaker, in our own papers we've got, is Fonterra too big for its gumboots, Mr Speaker? And then we have other reference here to Fonterra harming New Zealand and itself. We know these things. That is why it is important that we act together, Mr Speaker, to resolve this as quickly as possible. Fonterra is our single biggest company. We are proud of it. It is the single biggest exporter of anything from this country, and our economy relies upon it. It is a hybrid cooperative, Mr Speaker, and in this House recently we made changes to legislation that did expand the number of masters that Fonterra should answer to. As a pure cooperative, it was first and foremost to its farmers, and that was the traditional way of thinking. The new world that both farmers and the new unit holders through TAF realise is that it firstly must be responsible to its consumers, to its customers, the people who buy its products, Mr Speaker, and always keep in mind that health and safety of those consumers and of its workers should be its highest priority. Mr Speaker, the farmers who have owned this company and do so along with unit holders, investors today, are aware of the emerging, as I say, reality of social media, of media and communication that can send around the world at a flash any concern that might emerge from its operations, from its products, and they have to be on top of that reality. Mr Speaker, nothing should be hidden from the processes and the products that they produce in this country, Mr Speaker. And I think that, as I say, the priority that they must state clearly, more often perhaps to politicians, to the public, is that the health and safety of their consumers through the products and the health and safety of their workers at their work sites is the #1 priority for them. Production, growth, profit are all things that flow from good management, and I wish them all the very best with that. Mr. Speaker, I think it is important to point out the growth that the dairy industry has sustained. It has helped this country grow, but it does create some reality, I guess, for those looking at Fonterra from the outside. In 1990, the whole dairy industry produced about 500,000 tonnes of product for the world markets. About 5% of their total production gets consumed in New Zealand, and that's been a consistent right throughout. Mr. Speaker, this year, the company will export to the world about 2.7 million tonnes of product. There has been, from some farming leaders, reference to the fact that the tonnage involved here, 38 tonnes, is a very, very small percentage of that total production. That is true. Nonetheless, that small amount of contaminated production is something that the world is focusing on, we are focusing on, and we have to get that sorted out. One of the questions I have raised, it's not cheap politics, Mr. Speaker, but it is a real question about the government agency, MPI, and its ability, its capability to get alongside Fonterra and to help resolve this as quickly as possible. And I did go to look at the funding for that agency to ask whether it has been funded, because I was encouraged by the Prime Minister's statement that all possible resources will be committed to resolving this and to reassuring our customers. The question I must ask, and it's one that will be answered down the track, is that whether the actual cutback in funding for MPI has been at the right time when the dairy industry growth has been so phenomenal. We have had, from a meat industry report, again, meat striking trouble, some challenges getting into the Chinese market, Mr. Speaker, a report that identified insufficient resources were there to properly follow through with changes in accreditation and assurances that the Chinese market needed. Mr. Speaker, the question I ask, and it is for the government to answer at some stage in the future, as to whether the cutback in funding from, indeed, 427 million in 2008, a cut back to 417 million in 2013 at a time of rapid growth, particularly into markets, whether that perhaps has in some way contributed to this. Mr. Speaker, I go back, as I say, we're supporting the Prime Minister. He's given an assurance that all possible resources will be used. Mr. Speaker, our leader, David Shearer, has said that there needs to be questions asked of Fonterra systems and the interaction. Mr. Speaker, there will be time for that. And of course, the Minister of Food Safety, Nikki Kay, said that MPI staff would be placed at Fonterra's sites, and that is welcomed. One of the issues there may be, because the reality is the dairy industry is a self-regulated industry, unlike many others in the food industry, that is the government considering moving back to slightly more regulation. Mr. Speaker, there will be international observers. They won't be watching us here in the House. They don't have to endure that, Mr. Speaker, but they will be looking for assurances from Parliament. And I think it is important to give them. Mr. Speaker, we take food safety very seriously. This is a piece of legislation that is due to be back before Parliament to be passed, that governs the way that we deal with all food in this country. Rest assured we have good legislation, Mr. Speaker. The focus, as I say, of safety for consumers and workers must be the primary consideration, and indeed is, after a few lessons around worker safety that we've learnt, Mr. Speaker, but particularly around food safety. It is the #1 focus and priority, and committed and supported to by all parties in this House. Mr. Speaker, the second thing is that we have good systems of food production in this country. They may not be perfect, but anyone in the international marketplace can be assured that they are next to perfect, that in fact what we've identified here through an audit process, through testing, Mr. Speaker, is that we've had a problem. That is something that acknowledges the systems do work. Mr. Speaker, We've got a healthy democracy, we've got a robust system of accountability back to Parliament, and all the food produced in this country ultimately will be observed, tested, audited and checked by Parliament, and our customers should be sure that we'll be looking after their interest in the long term.
I call Ian McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.